coming on the air with President Trump, about to announce one of his big priorities here, laying out how he plans to win the battle over AI. Massive investment. This could be a big deal, and you know it's getting some big names over to the White House. We've got that, plus the president facing a flurry of lawsuits over his immigration plans and criticism over his blanket pardons of January 6th attackers. We've got every angle covered live across Washington at the start of his second term, the first full day. We are also looking at the launch of the so-called meme coins with the Trump name on them, sending the Trump family's values potentially soaring. A fellow billionaire comparing the move to the biggest Ponzi scheme ever, the new crypto concerns, and how his youngest son fits into it all. Then states of emergency across the South. The dangerous cold tonight in places that should not be dangerously cold. We're talking Texas, we're talking Florida. We'll take you live to Houston. Plus, how one of the hottest stars could see his huge year derailed. What we're watching as A$AP Rocky heads to court. And speaking of the legal battles of the rich and famous, how a last-minute settlement could stop Prince Harry's fight against Rupert Murdoch's newspapers. Why, no matter what, he could have to pay up. That's coming up a little bit later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air expecting to see President Trump literally any second. It is another night of rolling coverage here on NBC News Now. Here's what we expect to see happen as you're taking a live look there, an announcement of this huge investment on AI. As we have seen, the Trump name, the president himself, the Trump family really try to deepen these ties with the tech sector and vice versa. We're going to take you there live when he does speak, but already it's been a very busy first full day. By now, I bet you've seen the headlines of the dozens of executive orders and actions that the president has taken, from changing how this country defines gender identity to electric vehicles, energy production, DEI and gender identity, immigration too. On that front, already the legal challenges are piling up, like one from 15 blue states calling his challenge to the 14th Amendment's birthright clause, quote, unquestionably unconstitutional. Also tonight, a ton of new reaction for those pardons we brought you as breaking news last night for the hundreds of people who participated in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, including violent offenders. What you're seeing here, these videos, some of the people featured in these videos are some of the people who have been released, including Stuart Rhodes, the founder of the Oath Keepers, convicted on the most serious charge of seditious conspiracy. He spoke with our NBC News station here in Washington.
I think it's a good day for America that all the wrongs are being undone. So none of these people should have been here in the first place. None of them were ever tried in a fair trial.
To be clear, there's no evidence that any of the trials of any of the 1,500 plus people convicted in that attack were not fair. And the reactions from police officers there that day, as you can imagine, they sound very different. Sergeant Akalina Ganel sharing with NBC News some emails he's getting, along with calls and texts, letting him know that as an assault victim, those who hurt them are now out of prison. Or from the family of Brian Sicknick, the Capitol officer who died that day, calling it an undoing of justice, writing, quote, it is our hope that the truth of what happened that tragic day will survive, irrespective of partisan political objectives. Julie Sirkin's going to have more reaction on all of that as it's unfolding tonight in just a second. But I want to start with Vaughn Hilliard, who is joining us live now. And here's what's interesting, right? Not just the AI announcement, not just the people who have shown up here in Washington for this AI announcement, on top of the tech titans who were already here in Washington for the inauguration, but also the fact that the president may, we don't know when he's in these settings. We've seen him do it. We saw him do it last night. He may take some questions from those assembled in the room and make some news on a bunch of different fronts.
Exactly. This has been about as busy of a 36 hours as you could get for a president being sworn into office. 42 executive orders yesterday. We could potentially get more today. We were told to expect that several more would be released over the course of this week here. And we saw last night the now president, for nearly an hour inside of the Oval Office, field questions on a range of topics, threatening to put tariffs on China, Canada, Mexico. He went as far as to suggest that he would put 100% tariffs on China if they don't meet with an American investor and share in the ownership of TikTok. You also have, Hallie, here, right, this investment that the White House is prepared to tout here in the upcoming minutes of what they say is AI infrastructure. This is where you're going to potentially see the likes of CEOs from Oracle and other companies here that are quick to curry favor with President Trump, who is eager to partner up with these major tech industries and CEOs, like you saw Jeff Bezos and obviously Elon Musk, Tim Cook of Apple yesterday, there inside of the rotunda for his swearing in. This is a moment where President Trump believes that he has an opportunity to initiate and help agitate to a certain degree American businesses to move manufacturing and investments from overseas right here into the United States. We saw similar efforts with mixed results during his first administration, but what is different this time around is that these tech CEOs specifically are quick to come to his side and quick to come to Washington on the front end and the outset of his administration.
Hey, Von Hood, I'm going to ask you to stay close to that camera as we expect to, of course, see the president in the next minute or two here. Likely, potentially, could be a couple minutes longer if he's running behind schedule. But I want to bring in Brian Chung as well. He is joining us along with Julie Sirkin on Capitol Hill. Brian, let me go to you here because, you know, picking up on the thread that Vaughn laid down, there has been a lot of attention paid to these tech leaders who have flown to Washington, who have flown down previously to Mar-a-Lago after President Trump won the election in November, seemingly looking to establish closer ties. You've seen Democrats make hay of the fact that those tech titans were seated in the first row in front of cabinet officials. Senator Elizabeth Warren, for example, saying, hey, listen, you know, that kind of says everything, and I'm paraphrasing her. What is the expectation for the kind of influence that these folks will have, especially when they have business in front of the federal government and an interest in things like what Donald Trump is going to potentially do, the president is going to do in a few minutes on the AI front?
Yeah, I mean, you said it right there, Hallie, which is that it's really in the history books with all those images that we saw yesterday with these large tech titans literally in the history books, in those photos right next to the president of the United States as he was entering office for the second time. Sundar Pichai at Google, Vaughn Hilliard laid out all the other tech giants that were there, but Sam Altman at OpenAI is largely expected to be part of the announcement that we are waiting just a few minutes from now. But I think the big picture here is that Trump wants to make this presidency, his second go at the White House, a lot more about big tech and about the big innovation of artificial intelligence, which people even outside of politics will tell you could be the next, could already be an industrial revolution of the scale of what we've seen with, mills of hundreds of years ago. So I think that what we're trying to see here is whether or not this president will provide the money, provide the policy that's needed to encourage this, burgeoning industry to grow further. And I think it's underscored no further by the fact that on the first full day in office, he is corralling some of these major players. Again, I mentioned Sam Altman. He is largely seen as the face of artificial intelligence when we talk about ChatGPT. That is the person who is behind that. But Masayoshi Son is the person who's largely expected to be part of this announcement as well. He is the founder and CEO of SoftBank. This is a Japanese company, a conglomerate that has its arms in many different types of industries, but most notably has what they call a vision fund, which is essentially a large, massive piggy bank that they've been using to finance startups and other mature companies. And their latest kind of focus has been artificial intelligence, given how lucrative and how big that industry is. You have $100 billion commitment from Masayoshi Son after he already met with President Trump in Mar-a-Lago. We don't know if the announcement today is going to be a codification of that or maybe perhaps another layer of money that could be part of that. We'll have to see what the announcement is. But again, nonetheless, underscored by the fact that in his first day in office, he is focusing on artificial intelligence with these very, very influential people behind him.
Brian Chung, thank you. I want to ask you also to give up part of your evening and hang out with us as we wait to see what unfolds there at the White House. Julie Sirkin is live for us on Capitol Hill, where there is a lot going on, Julie. So let me take it in a couple of different pieces here. And let me start with the fallout from those wide-ranging January 6th pardons and commutations that President Trump issued on his first day in office, his first half day, if you will, of course, sworn in right around 12:01 p.m. yesterday. Now on his first full day, a lot of reaction to this, including from some of the people directly affected.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've been talking to these officers since that day. And I thought what was so interesting, Hallie, is that yesterday when President Biden issued pardons for some of them, and I was in conversation with Sergeant Aquilino Gonell, and he replied with his statement, and he said, I can't believe I have to get a pardon. And somebody who's getting inaugurated, who orchestrated this, in his words, just gets to be inaugurated into the White House. When I followed up with him about these pardons for the January 6th defendants, some of whom beat him with a stick and physically assaulted him and hurt him, and are partly responsible for why he no longer is on the Capitol Police Force, he just said he has no words. And I understand you have those emails that he shared with you as well. And I think for senators who were here on that day, you know, hiding under desks, hiding in their offices, trying to go on with that vote to certify the election, this is sticking with them as well. I want you to take a listen to a little bit of what we heard.
We're looking forward to the next 4 years, not the last 4.
I think they were absolutely justified. Again, I don't know all the cases. I certainly don't want to pardon any violent actors, but there was a real miscarriage of justice here.
But it was surprising to me that it was a blanket pardon.
Based on my conversations, Hallie, and what you just heard from Tom Tillis, that surprise extends far beyond him. I think a lot of Republicans are surprised. We heard from Susan Collins, who said that the violent defendants should not have been pardoned. We heard from the Capitol Police Chief Manger, who wrote an internal memo to his Capitol Police Force saying, in part, when there is no price to pay for violence against law enforcement, it sends a message that politics matter more than our first responders. So this is having a chilling effect on members of both sides of the aisle, on members of the Capitol Police Force, and you can see it in their faces when you walk around this building, although, of course, they voted in different ways this past election, Hallie.
Julie, I also understand on a separate matter, as we are starting to see the confirmations of at least one of the president's cabinet picks. That's, of course, Secretary of State now, Marco Rubio, as of the swearing in this morning. There's also some exclusive reporting that you and our team have on his pick to lead the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, Sarah Fitzpatrick, Courtney Cubie, and I broke this story this morning. Senators now have, for the first time in this entire confirmation process, a name on the record, Danielle Hegseth, who was the sister-in-law of Samantha Hegseth, Pete Hegseth's second wife, who says in these new details that we've obtained in this affidavit that there were moments where Samantha had executed escape plans to get away from Pete Hegseth. At one point, she actually fled to another state because of it. She hid in the closet, according to Danielle Hegseth, to get away from him. She feared Pete Hegseth because of his alcohol abuse and the anger that would come with that. I want to be clear, though, we've been in touch with Samantha Hegseth as well, even before this affidavit came to light. And she did say after this affidavit came out that the one thing she disputes is that there was no physical abuse in her relationship with Pete Hegseth, although this affidavit alleges so much more. Danielle Hegseth, by the way, saying in that affidavit that she came forward in part because she got assurances from senators that there will be enough votes to take Hegseth down if and when he's up for a full confirmation. We'll see if that happens, but I know Republicans have been viewing it, Hallie.
Julie Sirkin, live for us on Capitol Hill. Julie, thank you. Right now, other headlines of the night, including the big one, Southern California under another fire threat, about 120 miles away from L.A. and San Diego. We are already seeing flames spark up with at least 2 new fires there and now new evacuations. In the L.A. area, Altadena is now letting people back into their neighborhoods after that deadly Eaton fire. And crews are still working, just 24/7 to try to put out some of these smaller pop-up fires. Like this one here you're looking at near the Griffith Observatory, very well-known, well-recognized landmark there in L.A. An arson suspect is now under arrest. Morgan Chesky is on the ground for us in San Diego. Talk to us about timeline for this higher risk of fires here. And you know people are crossing their fingers that some rain's on the way.
Yeah, Hallie, they're crossing their fingers, but we're seeing why these red flag warnings are in effect. We're in the Mission Valley neighborhood of San Diego, and this is just a glimpse of what burned over the last several hours. Entire hillside charred. Evacuations forced in those apartment buildings up alongside that ridgeline. And we know at least 100 firefighters are here doing their best to encircle this entire perimeter, putting out those hot spots. This was caused, Hallie, by just a little wind that took those flames and fanned them across this area here. The acreage is still being estimated right now, but this is why when officials warn that conditions are prime, this is exactly what they mean, and that this erupted and then burned across, fortunately contained within just a couple hours' time. everyone to the north of us in Los Angeles watching those wind conditions and being incredibly tense right now because we know, unfortunately, even though those red flag warnings expire at 10 o'clock tonight, at least here for San Diego, Hallie, I spoke to one firefighter earlier today. He says that should not give people significant relief. We have an abundance of fuel that was caused by wet years past that has now been dried out as a result of an incredible lack of rain. And so between the fuel and the winds available, even though if there's no red flag warning present, it doesn't take much to ignite a serious fire here. We do know that evacuations are being lifted in this area, but they still have roads closed off nearby. But Hallie, this only adds to the uncertainty throughout really all of Southern California, particularly in light of the fact that we had a historic series of wildfires in Los Angeles that we've been following on a day-by-day basis that has a recovery, the likes of which we've never seen before. Hallie?
Talk to us about the conditions. I mean, you talked about how they're spreading way further south now. At this point, how are folks handling all this?
Well, I mean, certainly there is an air of uneasiness and of uncertainty, particularly when people are in a mall just across the street and they look up and they see fire crews doing exactly what they've done up and down the Palisades and across the Altadena neighborhoods that so many people here in San Diego have been watching play out on the news over the last 2 weeks. The good news to report right now, Hallie, is that they do believe that they have this fire encircled, but conditions being what they are, we've witnessed in real time that it does not take much to cause a fire emergency. Hallie?
Morgan Chesky live for us there in San Diego. You can see it right in the thick of it. Morgan, thank you. The other big news, this Arctic blast, basically unprecedented, happening in parts of the South here with states of emergency all across the region. I can't even tell you, like, Texas is getting snow. Houston has tied its unofficial record of 3 inches already. Parts of Alabama, Louisiana hitting records also. Some areas seeing their first blizzard warnings ever. Look at that. Looks like fun in Houston with snow angels and like little castles sledding there. But it is just a wild scene for so many. And in some parts, it really is dangerous, right? Look at this. Parts of the Florida Panhandle getting snow. Beach towns dealing with snow. Some airports suspending operations completely. More than 30,000 people facing power outages. And look at that. Pensacola. Welcome to Florida, question mark? I want to bring in Priscilla Thompson, who is on the ground over in Texas. Priscilla, listen. It is winter, it is cold, period, full stop. Have you watched this show before? You've heard me say it, but to see it in places like this that are simply not accustomed to dealing with the ice, the snow, you're seeing the power outages already. Talk to us about the impact.
Yeah, Hallie, it is hard to believe that we are in Houston right now. When you look around at this winter wonderland, the snow was coming down very heavy earlier today, and it has stopped now. But folks are getting out there enjoying that snow. But as you noted, there are a lot of very real concerns, one of them being with people being out on the roads. And we have seen a lot of people doing that, particularly in this downtown Houston area, coming out in buggies and in their trucks and trying to spin out and do wheelies on the roads. And that is totally not safe. And thankfully, there have been police and other folks out trying to patrol some of that. But what officials are saying here and across these regions, Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, all of these places, is that people need to stay off the roads. These are not conditions that people in the South are necessarily used to driving in. And they also want road crews to be able to get out there to do the salting, to do the plows in the cities that have the plows. But as you noted, this is the South. A lot of these cities are not even stocked with those kinds of resources. And so some of this is going to be waiting for this snow to melt. And that is where the concern is going to come in over the next couple days, because we're talking about temperatures that are going to remain below freezing. And so that ice could become a bigger threat on the roads. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, a sentence that is surprising to say, live in snowy Houston. Priscilla, thank you so much. We'll check back in with you in just a little bit. Appreciate it. There's some new fallout tonight, too, as we're just learning thousands of Afghan refugees who'd been cleared to come to the U.S. already are now facing flight cancellations, according to a refugee resettlement advocate. President Trump just signed an executive order putting a halt on refugee programs in the U.S., with the White House writing, the United States lacks the ability to absorb large numbers of migrants and, in particular, refugees into its communities in a manner that does not compromise the availability of resources for Americans. The executive order goes on to say the refugee program will stay suspended until further entry into the U.S. of refugees aligns, quoting here, with the interests of the United States. I want to go to Courtney Kuby, who is live for us right now. And Courtney, the conflict here, right, is that there are so many people in the eyes of these refugee resettlement advocates who were helpful to the United States during, of course, its war in Afghanistan, for example, here, that are now having trouble getting into the U.S., including, according to this resettlement advocacy group, apparently family members of active duty military members, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And that's this group, Afghan EVAC, and they have been involved in helping Afghans get out of Afghanistan since 2021. Hallie, the head of that group, Sean Van Diver, is a veteran himself. He and other veterans have been working to help these Afghans now for several years. They say that upwards of more than 1,600 Afghans who were approved for resettlement are now waiting to see if they can actually get out of Afghanistan, some even in Pakistan. As you mentioned, some could be family members, also unaccompanied minors who are hoping to reunite with their families, Hallie.
How much does this extend beyond Afghanistan, Court?
Yeah, so there are countries all over the world, frankly, this is going to apply to. These refugee programs and the refugee resettlement also apply to South America. We're talking about thousands of people here, Hallie.
Courtney Kuby, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll be checking back in with you as more on this story unfolds. We mentioned at the top of the show here, President Trump making an announcement at the White House, this infrastructure announcement. Let's listen in.
I won the race and that they feel confident in their investments, and it's big money and high quality people. So my first day back from having a nice life, it's my honor to welcome three of the world's leading technology CEOs. And in the case of Larry Ellison, it's well beyond technology. He's sort of CEO of everything. He's an amazing man, an amazing business person. But to announce the largest AI infrastructure project by far in history, and it's all taking place right here in America. As you know, there's great competition for AI and other things, and they're coming in at the highest level. We're joined by Oracle Executive Chairman Larry Ellison, SoftBank CEO, my friend Masa Yoshi-san, and CEO of OpenAI, and I would say by far the leading expert based on everything I read, Sam Altman. So that's great that you're coming in together. That's a massive group of talent and money. Together, these world-leading technology giants are announcing the formation of Stargate. So put that name down in your books, because I think you're going to hear a lot about it in the future. A new American company that will invest $500 billion at least in AI infrastructure in the United States, and very, very quickly, moving very rapidly, creating over 100,000 American jobs almost immediately. This monumental undertaking is a resounding declaration of confidence in America's potential under a new president. Let me be a new president. I didn't say it, they did. So I appreciate that, fellas. But it'll ensure the future of technology. What we want to do is we want to keep it in this country. China is a competitor and others are competitors. We want it to be in this country, and we're making it available. I'm going to help a lot through emergency declarations, because we have an emergency. We have to get this stuff built. So they have to produce a lot of electricity, and we'll make it possible for them to get that production done very easily at their own plants if they want, where they'll build at the plant, the AI plant, they'll build energy generation, and that will be incredible. But it's technology and artificial intelligence, all made in the USA. Beginning immediately, Stargate will be building the physical and virtual infrastructure to power the next generation of advancements in AI, and this will include the construction of colossal data centers, very, very massive structures. I was in the real estate business. These buildings, these are big, beautiful buildings, are going to employ a lot of people. And physical campuses in locations currently being scouted nationwide. They're making their choices of locations. I think they have their choice. I'd like to ask Larry, Sam, and Masa to say a few words and just talk about a little bit about what they're doing. And if you have any questions, and then we'll go into a couple of other subjects also. But this is, to me, a very big thing. $500 billion Stargate project. I think it's going to be something that's very special. It'll lead to something that could be the biggest of all. So, Larry, maybe we'll start with you, and we'll go down the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We certainly couldn't do this without you. It would simply be impossible. AI holds incredible promise for all of us, for every American. We've actually been working with OpenAI for a while and with Masa for a while. The data centers are actually under construction. The first of them are under construction in Texas. Each building's 500,000 square feet. There are 10 buildings currently being built, but that will expand to 20, and other locations beyond the Abilene location, which is our first location. The kind of applications that we're building, to give you an idea, maybe the most charismatic and the one that I think touches us all is electronic health records. Not just maintaining electronic health records, but by looking at electronic health records, understanding the condition of doctors, better understanding the condition of their patients, and being able to provide healthcare plans that are much better than they otherwise would be. A doctor in Indian River Reservation would be able to see how a doctor at Memorial Sloan Kettering would treat the patient, or a doctor at Stanford would treat the patient. We actually provide all of that information, all of that guidance to the doctors who are treating cancer patients or patients with any other kind of disease, made possible by AI. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'm going to pass it to Masa, but this is a very exciting program for Oracle to be a part of. Thank you.
Thank you. That really helped. That's good. That's great. I feel
listening to some of these tech leaders speak at the White House as President Trump is on his first full day in office. Listen, I want to bring back Vaughn Hilliard and Brian Chung. And Vaughn, you know, this in many ways is announcements like these, moments like these are in many ways the bread and butter of any administration, right? No matter which one you talk to. For President Trump, significant for a couple of reasons. One, you know, first full day in office. Two, this backdrop of his relationship with some of these tech leaders in a way that we didn't see 8 years ago, when it was a very different relationship, right? And you covered the president back then. It was a very different relationship between not just Donald Trump, but conservatives more broadly and some of these tech groups.
Right. And Larry Ellison of Oracle is actually somebody who, we should be clear, just about a year and a half ago was a big backer in supporting Tim Scott, a Republican presidential rival to Donald Trump during the 2024 campaign. And yet you have Masa's son, you have Sam Altman, and you have Larry Ellison there coming and essentially announcing a partnership. And I know that we're still looking at the exact details of this here in real time, and I'm sure that Brian is as well here. But to just have these individuals standing in the White House with the now President Trump, it is just a stark contrast to some of the pushback that Donald Trump faced in a relationship that was much more tension-based during his first 4 years. I mean, if you go back, I recall it was in 2017 after Charlottesville that several CEOs who were on his economic council, they had resigned from their voluntary posts and calling out his leadership from the White House. But then in 2019, it was then President Trump who was threatening these companies with not giving them waivers through their own companies through the tariffs that he was imposing on goods that were being imported, and that included not only products but also parts brought in by companies. And remember, it was Tim Cook back in 2019 of Apple who then President Trump said that he had a good relationship with Tim Cook at the time compared to other tech CEOs because Tim Cook actually called him and wanted to talk, and that they had a direct line of communication. You fast forward 6 years later, it seems like others like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, they have taken a much different approach, and that kind of Tim Cook approach to their relationship with the now president, who is trying to capitalize for himself and make the case for the American economy that these are partnerships that are ultimately going to be good for domestic manufacturing and production.
Brian Chun, let me bring you into the conversation here, because the future of AI, I mean, we saw it in the political campaign here, and you heard experts raise questions about what AI could do to the political space, especially when it came to things like misinformation, things that, you know, weren't true, things that were invented by AI, basically. You look at the future of AI, it is going to be critical to so much of the business infrastructure here in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a reason.
Let me just go back in and listen to the president for 1 second. He said he was going to take some questions. Let's see if he's doing that.
Yep.
1 sec.
How will AI help us with the fight against the various problems, diseases, etc.?
These guys can maybe share more about some of the work they're doing there. I think they'll jointly be some of the leaders about driving progress here. But I believe that as this technology progresses, we will see diseases get cured at an unprecedented rate. We will be amazed at how quickly we're curing this cancer and that one and heart disease, and what this will do for the ability to deliver very high quality healthcare, the costs, but really to cure the diseases at a rapid rate, I think will be among the most important things this technology does.
Great. Very good. Thank
Can I stick in and answer that question, Mr. President? So we're currently working on. Should I step on this? Okay. All right. No. I'm not that tough.
Brian, it's interesting to see Sam Altman, who is one of the sort of next generation leaders here in the AI space at the White House, having these conversations, this dialogue here about the future of AI.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty critical exchange there. I mean, when you think about who is on the leading front lines of developing this type of software, and also kind of holds the keys to the ethical questions around this, whether or not AI could be something that could lead to the proliferation of misinformation, or could be technology, as Elon Musk has warned, that could even kill humanity at some point. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but Sam Altman is likely the person who is kind of the most privy to that type of breakthrough here. He's really been the person that brought things like ChatGPT, the things that people will be commonly associating with the technology of AI. It's really been all him. So that interaction with him and the president is going to be very key going forward over the next 4 years as to how the White House and how the government not only provides the funding around this, because this announcement here is pretty much about the fact that it's these three major players, SoftBank, Oracle, and OpenAI, committing to at least $500 billion into the AI space. So yes, the money's there, but also the regulatory and the legal guardrails that will be placed on this industry to allow them to make that happen.
Yeah, it's not just this industry watching to see what Donald Trump is going to do. It's also something we'll talk about, I know, later on tonight, Brian. But it's also the crypto industry watching all of this. With the announcement by the SEC today under the Trump administration of this new crypto task force, you have a lot of people in that space looking to see what the feds are going to do now that Donald Trump's in charge.
Yeah, I mean, a massive technological push from the Trump administration, but also by the president himself, who tried to advance his own crypto meme coin. And I do believe he's about to maybe answer some questions here, Hallie.
Yeah, well, listen in, Brian. He's going to wrap up here from these leaders. And then the president has alluded to taking some questions on this and perhaps other topics as well from the reporters in the room. So let's listen back in here. President Trump on his first full day in office live at the White House.
For Larry to be here and do this is very unusual because he doesn't do this stuff. He doesn't need it. He does, and you don't need it, do you? Huh? You don't need it. But I think it's an honor to the country. It's a great honor that this group, these are the top people, that they're going to do it, and they're going to do it here, and we're going to make it as easy as it can be. A $500 million Stargate project comes in addition to a separate pledge between $100 and $200 billion from, as we know, from Massa that we talked about before. Also $20 billion from DMAC, which was great. And we have many others that are coming. Some I just announce it. It's easier. But with some, I know them, and they're so highly respected, I'd rather do it this way. Many would like to do it this way, but we're letting the world know what's happening. This is money that normally would have gone to China or other countries, but in particular China. In total, before the end of my first full business day in Washington in the White House, we've already secured nearly $3 trillion of new investments in the United States, and probably that's going to be 6 or 7 by the end of the week. Tremendous amounts of money are coming in for many things other than even AI. AI seems to be very hot. It seems to be the thing that a lot of smart people are looking at very strongly. And our country will be prospering like never before. I think that's true. And it's going to be the golden age of America. As I say, yesterday we had the most ambitious, action-oriented day of any administration in history. No, there's never been a first day like yesterday, as you know. I signed a sweeping slate of executive orders to stop the invasion of our borders. I launched a government-wide effort to defeat inflation and bring down the cost of daily life and bring down the cost of energy, magnificently bring it down. And when energy comes down, Larry, I'd say generally speaking, when energy comes down, everything else comes down. The prices of food and the prices of everything else come down. Energy is that's the big baby. And we declared a national energy emergency to drill, baby, drill, our term that we use. We're going to drill, baby, drill like never before. We ended destructive DEI mandates across the federal government and returned our country to a merit-based system and a common sense system. As you know, the Supreme Court gave us a decision on merit, where things in this country can be based on merit now instead of a lot of different rules, regulations, and things that really put our country at a big disadvantage. We permanently stopped government censorship and restored free speech. That was signed yesterday. We renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Sounds so beautiful, the Gulf of America, and returned the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley. They took off the name, and he was actually a great president. He was a very, very successful businessman. He ran for governor of Ohio. He won and did a great job as governor, ran for president, and he won. He was assassinated, ultimately, in his second term, unfortunately. But he was the tariff king, and he... I don't think he was as bad as I am. I think I believe in him even more than him, but he believed in him very strongly. And he raised massive amounts of money. Our country was at its richest from 1870 to 1913. We had the most, that was when we were the richest, relatively speaking. We were the richest during that period of time. That was tariffs from other countries. And our administration's moving with unprecedented urgency and speed to confront every single crisis facing us, and we'll get the job done. And again, I want to thank Sam and Masa and Larry for being here. It's an honor to have them. And we'll take a few questions if you want.
Some of the executive orders, you would agree that it's never acceptable to assault a police officer.
Sure.
Right? So then if I can, among those you pardoned, DJ Rodriguez, he drove a stun gun into the neck of a D.C. police officer who was abducted by the mob that day. He later confessed on video to the FBI and pleaded guilty for his crimes. Why does he deserve a pardon?
Well, I don't know. Was it a pardon? Because we're looking at commutes and we're looking at pardons. Okay, well, we'll take a look at everything. But I can say this. Murderers today are not even charged. You have murderers that aren't charged all over. You take a look at what's gone on in Philadelphia, take a look at what's gone on in L.A., where people murder people and they don't get charged. These people have already served years in prison, and they've served them viciously. It's a disgusting prison. It's been horrible. It's inhumane. It's been a terrible, terrible thing. I also say this. You go to Portland, where they wrapped police officers, shot police officers, nothing happened to anybody. You go to Seattle, where they took over a big chunk of the city and people died. Portland, a lot of people died. Wait a minute. And you go also, take a look at Minneapolis, because I was there and I watched it. And if I didn't bring in the National Guard, that city wouldn't even exist today. People were killed and nobody went to jail. So these people have already served a long period of time, and I made a decision to give a pardon. Joe Biden gave a pardon yesterday to a lot of criminals. These are criminals that he gave a pardon to. And you should be asking that question. Why did he give a pardon to all of these people that committed crimes? Why did he give a pardon to the J6 Unselect Committee when they burned and destroyed all documents which showed that they did what was wrong, not me? Wait a minute. Why did they give a pardon to all of his relatives, his brother who made millions of dollars, to all these different people? He gave pardons. That's the question you should be answering. All right, go ahead. Yeah, please.
If I can Can I just follow up really about your Steve, can I just follow up on that really fast?
No.
I just want to ask
Go
you
ahead.
this. You said
Tell us about your meeting with Speaker Johnson, Senator Thune. Did you reach any conclusion on this one big?
Pretty much. I think we have a good situation now. It's been in some ways made simpler by Los Angeles because they're going to need a lot of money. And generally speaking, I think you'll find that a lot of Democrats are going to be asking for help. So I think maybe that makes it more one-sided. I think we're going to do very well. Look, we're going to take care of Los Angeles. I'm going there. I'm going to North Carolina, which has been abandoned by the Democrats. And I'm going to North Carolina, very importantly, first. I'll be there on Friday. And then I'm going from there to Los Angeles. And then I'm going to Nevada. And I'm really going to Nevada to thank them for the vote because we won Nevada overwhelmingly. And that's usually a Democrat vote. And I just want to go there to thank the people of Nevada for the big vote. So we'll be making that. Yeah, please.
The leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were free following their pardons yesterday. At the time, back in 2021, you urged them to stand back and stand by. Is there now a place for them in the political conversation?
Well, we have to see they've been given a pardon. I thought their sentences were ridiculous and excessive. One of the guys took down a flag that was an anti-American flag, and he was given years in jail. I don't know the exact number, but he was given many years in jail. I thought it was very excessive. And at least the cases that we looked at, these were people that actually love our country, so we thought a pardon would be appropriate, yeah.
Mr. President, is it also true in your conversations with Republicans today that you asked them to consider recess appointments for cabinet officials?
I think, yeah, if it's needed. I don't think it's going to be needed. Marco, as you know, got passed overwhelmingly with 99-0, which is pretty amazing. Marco's going to do a great job, Secretary of State, but he just got, I guess he was the first one and just got approved. That's some vote, 99-0, and the nothing was a vote that he would have gotten if we wanted to do it. But you know whose vote that was? Who's doing a great job right now as vice president.
Did you also talk about some sort of a trade or a deal involving wildfire relief in extension for a debt?
Well, what I really want to have done, I was talking about this with the guys back in the Oval Office. Los Angeles has massive amounts of water available to it. All they have to do is turn the valve, and that's the valve coming back from and down from the Pacific Northwest, where millions of gallons of water a week and a day, even in many cases, pours into California, goes all through California down to Los Angeles, and they turned it off. It's off now. The valve goes, it turns toward the Pacific Ocean, and all that water goes pouring into the Pacific Ocean. If they did what I told them to do, they wouldn't do it because politically they didn't think it was good. I think it's great politically. I think they're dead politically. What they've done, they've destroyed the city. What they've done to that city is unbelievable. The sprinklers, their sprinklers in there like these right here that you see, none of them had any water in them. They didn't have any water. The fire hydrants, 40% of them had no water. The brush was just dry. Everything was dry. The sprinklers on the lawn weren't allowed to even be used. So, you know, everything was dry, and it was an inferno. They created an inferno. So we're demanding that they turn the valve back toward Los Angeles right now. It's not even believable that they haven't done it. Just so you know, they have a valve, and it turns like, think of a sink, but multiply it times many thousands of times the size of it. It's massive. And you turn it back toward Los Angeles. Why aren't they doing it? They either have a death wish, they're stupid, or there's something else going on that we don't understand. But we want the water that they're throwing away to be used for California. And that includes the farmers of California. You know, when you drive up north, you see all of the land. I couldn't believe it. I was with Devin Nunes when he was a congressman and some other congressmen from the area, and we're driving up and we're on the highway, and I keep looking at these farms, and the land is bone dry, and then you'd see an acre, about an acre or 2 acres, with the most beautiful green plants growing in it, the most beautiful you've ever. It's rich stuff, and you look at the soil, and it's so rich. That soil is almost the equivalent to like Iowa soil. It's phenomenal. It's got no water. But the reason it has no water, I said, do you have a drought? No. I said, what do you mean you don't have a drought? Look at the thing. It's dry as a bone. The reason you have like an acre is because they say you can farm 1 acre, but no more, because they didn't want to waste water. But they throw the water into the Pacific Ocean. These people are crazy. So we're going to be issuing an executive order demanding that they immediately let that water come down through California. Farmers, even people living in Beverly Hills. Now, those people have been a lot of them are wiped out. Believe it or not, they were having restrictions, Larry, you know about this. They wanted to restrict you to 38 gallons of water a day. That sounds like a lot, but it's not. When you're a rich person and you like to take a shower, 38 gallons doesn't last very long. And they have all this water, and it's really good water. Up high, Pacific Northwest. Some comes in from Canada, a nice country, by the way. Comes in from Canada, and it comes all the way through California, and they're restricting it. You even have the half pipes, the half pipes, the cut pipes, big ones, bigger than this room. And they're going all the way down, and they're bone dry, and they could be loaded up with water. But isn't it incredible that they don't do it? And it's to protect the Delta smelt. It's a fish that's doing poorly anyway. But I said, how are you protecting the Delta smelt by not giving it water? It's a fish. It needs water. Nobody can answer that question.
President TikTok, Mr. President.
Well, let me do this first.
Are you open to Elon buying TikTok?
Is it?
Are you open to Elon buying TikTok?
I would be if he wanted to buy it, yeah.
And on your inauguration,
I'd like Larry to buy it, too. I have the right to make a deal. So the deal I'm thinking about, Larry, let's negotiate in front of the media. The deal, I think, is this. And I've met with owners of TikTok, the big owners. It's worthless if it doesn't get a permit. It's not like, oh, you can take the U.S. The whole thing is worthless. With a permit, it's worth like $1 trillion. So what I'm thinking about saying to somebody is buy it and give half to the United States of America, half, and we'll give you the permit. And they'll have a great partner, the United States. And they'll have something that's actually more valuable because they have the ultimate partner, and the United States will make it very worthwhile for them in terms of the permits and everything else. But so think of it, you have an asset that has no value or has $1 trillion value. It all depends on whether or not the United States gives the permit. So what I'm saying is let the United States give the permit, and the United States should get half. Sounds reasonable. What do you think?
Sounds like a good deal to me, Mr. President.
Yeah, he can afford it, too.
Mr. President, you're a president who has long said that you back the blue, but aren't you sending the message that assaulting officers is okay with these pardons?
No, the opposite. In fact, I'm going to be letting 2 officers from Washington Police, D.C. I believe they're from D.C., but I just approved it. They were arrested, put in jail for 5 years because they went after an illegal, and I guess something happened where something went wrong. And they arrested the 2 officers and put them in jail for going after a criminal, a rough criminal, by the way. And I'm actually releasing. No, I am the friend of police, more than any president that's ever been in this office.
More than 400 of the people that you pardoned, though, assaulted officers. So I want to ask you about the Vice President, J.D. Vance. He said, this is a week ago, he said, if you committed violence on January 6th, obviously you should not be pardoned. Why is your Vice President wrong?
Well, only for one reason. They've served years in jail. They should not have served, and they've served years in jail, and murderers don't even go to jail in this country. And we had 1,500. We have 16 under review. As you know, we commuted about 16 of them because it looks like they could have done things that were not acceptable for a full pardon. But these people have served years of jail, and their lives have been ruined. And in many cases, listen to me for a second. Stop interrupting. They've served years in jail, and if you look at the American public is tired of it. Take a look at the election. Just look at the numbers on the election. We won this election in a landslide because the American public is tired of people like you that are just one-sided, horrible people in terms of crime. You don't talk about all the people that have been killed and what happens to those murderers. Murderers get no time. You take a look at some of these DAs. They go after political opponents, but they don't go after people that shoot people in the street. They're caught. They know where they're living. They know everything. They don't even go up to pick them up anymore. They just let them live there. They know all about it. They have their pictures. They have the tape of the shooting, and they don't even go up and you're talking about this. No, we pardoned people that were treated unbelievably poorly. In the history of our country, there's never been anything take place like this. They're still looking for them, but they're not looking for the murderers, the people that are killing everybody. We are, though, and we're getting them out of the country. We just started that. We're getting them out of the country, and they're going to be gotten out of the country fast. They came in illegally from jails and from prisons. They killed many people. Some of them killed many people. About 50% of them killed more than one person. They were released into our country. That's what we're focused on, not the kind of nonsense you're talking about.
You've called for a ceasefire in Ukraine. If Vladimir Putin doesn't come to the table to negotiate with you, will you put additional sanctions on Russia?
Sounds likely.
And do you think that the war should be frozen currently along
the
with
war should have never
lines?
started. If you had a competent president, which you didn't, the war wouldn't have happened. The war in Ukraine would have never happened if I were president. But that couldn't happen because the election was rigged. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. President, there's been some debate within your orbit over whether or not to keep or eliminate H-1B visas. What's your position on that? Do you want to keep H-1Bs or do you want to get rid of them?
I like both sides of the argument, but I also like very competent people coming into our country, even if that involves them training and helping other people that may not have the qualifications they do. But I don't want to stop. And I'm not just talking about engineers. I'm talking about people at all levels. We want competent people coming into our country. And HB1, I know the program very well. I use the program. Maitre d's, wine, experts, even waiters, high quality waiters. You got to get the best people. Now, then you go into people like Larry, and he needs engineers, and Massa needs, and this gentleman needs engineers like nobody's ever needed engineers, right? So we have to have the quality people coming in. Now, by doing that, we're expanding businesses, and that takes care of everybody. So I'm sort of on both sides of the argument, but what I really do feel is that we have to let really competent people, great people come into our country, and we do that through the H-1 program.
Mr. President, are you looking to impose tariffs on Canada and Mexico in an effort to force negotiations sooner on USMCA?
No, it's really not on USMCA. It has nothing to do with that. They've allowed, both of them, Canada very much so, they've allowed millions and millions of people to come into our country that shouldn't be here. They could have stopped them, and they didn't. And they've killed 300,000 people last year. My opinion, have been destroyed by drugs, by fentanyl. The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive. The fentanyl coming through Mexico is massive. And people are getting killed, and families are being destroyed. I mean, the son gets killed, and the family is a basket case for the rest of their lives. I mean, I've seen mothers that thought they'd heal. They never heal. They say it gets worse with time. It gets worse with time. They lose their boy. They lose their baby. They lose their young daughter to fentanyl poisoning. And I had that talk with President Xi the other day, too, of China. I said, we don't want that crap in our country. We got to stop it. I would have stopped it. I had a deal with him where he was going to give the maximum penalty, which in China is the death penalty for drug dealing. And he was all set. He was going to give the maximum penalty to fentanyl dealers. If they send to the United States, they were going to get the death penalty. And, of course, Biden didn't pick that up. I had that deal all done. It was all wrapped up. We were going to have it done. And then the election went, let's put it nicely, didn't go the proper way. I'm trying to be nice about it. It was rigged. And we had an incompetent president elected, and he never followed up on that deal. But he should have followed up. Because if they got the death penalty, they wouldn't be sending fentanyl to Mexico, Canada, and other places. We're thinking about that, too. We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
How soon on those tariffs?
probably February 1st is the date we're looking at. For Mexico and China, we're talking about approximately 25%.
Update on the Gaza ceasefire, and are you planning to travel to the Middle East soon?
We're thinking about going to the Middle East, not yet. We have a thing called the hostages are coming back going on right now, and they are coming back. Some of them have been very damaged. You look at the young lady with her hand practically blown off. You know how that happened, right? Did you know how that happened? When you find out, you're not going to be too happy because it was terrible. But the hostages are starting to come back. If I weren't here, they wouldn't be back ever. They would have never come back. They would have all died. If this were done a year earlier, if Biden would have done this deal a year and a half, 2 years ago, or frankly, it should have never happened. October 7th should have never happened. Nobody should be dead. But through weakness, they allowed it to happen, and then it was a disaster from them. But you go back just 6 months ago, many of these young people were living. Young people don't die like that. They're just dying. And young people aren't dying at 22 and 23 years old. They don't die. But now they're dying, and you wonder why they're dying. They're being killed, and they have been killed. But they say 6 months ago, you would have had 11 more living hostages. Think of that. 6 months ago, but Biden couldn't get it done, and it was only the imposition that I put on as a deadline that got it done. But it's a very sad situation. It should have never happened. I'll tell you, 2 things should have never happened. 3 things: inflation should have never happened. It would have never happened, except for what they did to energy and their crazy spending. And Ukraine would have never happened. Never. By the way, Russia never would have gone into Ukraine. I had a very strong understanding with Putin that it would have never, ever happened. He disrespected Biden. Very simple. He disrespects people. He's smart. He understands. He disrespected Biden. And also, the Middle East would have never happened because Iran was broke. They had no money. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. It would have never happened. October 7th would have never happened, but it did happen. So this is the cards I've been given, and we're getting the hostages back. That would have never happened under Biden. They would have never come back. They were just dying not that slowly. They were dying or being killed, but that was what was happening.
Are you going to keep sending weapons to Ukraine, or are you going to turn off the tap soon?
Well, we're looking at that. We're talking to Zelensky. We're going to be talking with President Putin very soon, and we'll see how it all happens. We're going to look at it very soon. One thing I do feel, the European Union should be paying a lot more than they're paying, because under Biden, I mean, we're in there for $200 billion more. Now, it affects them more than it affects us. We have an ocean in between, right? Little thing called an ocean. The European Union should equalize. We're in there for $200 billion more than the European Union. I mean, what are we, stupid? I guess the answer is yes, because they must think so. But the European Union takes advantage of us tremendously on trade, and they now take advantage of, and always have. If I didn't get involved years ago, in my first term, one of the first things I noticed was that they're not paying enough. They're not paying. And a lot of those countries weren't even paying. The NATO countries, they weren't paying. Only 7 out of 28 were paying. We were one of them. And Poland was one. And they had a few of them that were paying, and some were paying very proudly. Usually the closer to the borderline of Russia they were, the faster they paid, okay? The ones that were further away tended not to pay so fast. And one thing on that, I think they should lift their number not to 2%, but to 5%. NATO should be at 5%, not at 2%. 2% is ridiculous, yeah.
Did you ask President Xi in your conversation about Ukraine, you asked him to get involved in helping settle that? Can you tell us about that?
I did, yeah. I said, you ought to get it settled, because he's not done very much on that. He's got a lot of power, like we have a lot of power. I said, you ought to get it settled. We did discuss it, yeah.
Do you intend to continue selling products that benefit yourself personally while you're president?
Well, I don't know if it benefited. I don't know where it is. I don't know much about it other than I launched it. I heard it was very successful. I haven't checked it. Where is it today?
You made a lot of money, sir.
How much?
Several $billions, it seems like, in the last several days.
Several billion, that's peanuts for these guys.
So you talked about the letter from President Biden. Can you give us some sense, broadly speaking?
Yeah, he wrote me a nice letter. I mean, I did open it last night. And I didn't know. Peter said, did you get the letter? I said, wait a minute, let's see the letter. It's sort of a tradition. You put it in the drawer, especially of the beautiful Resolute desk, right? And I opened the drawer, and there it was. It said to number 47. And it was a very nice letter. I mean, I could show it because I think it was a nice letter. Maybe I will. I think
What did you say in terms of
just basically it was a little bit of an inspirational type letter, you know. Enjoy it, do a good job. Important, very important, how important the job is. But I think it was a nice letter. I think I should let people see it because it was a positive for him in writing it. I appreciated the letter.
Were security concerns at all a factor when deciding to move your inauguration indoors?
No, not at all. No, not at all. It was just cold. Look, if we would have, you know, I just went out to the helicopter, right, we said goodbye. That's a tradition. As long as before it used to be a stagecoach, and then helicopters came along. But that's been a tradition. You go out and you do that. And we stood there for 10 minutes, and I'll tell you what, people would not have been able to get through that day. That was cold. It was sort of interesting. Don't let the sun fool you. Tell me something. Sunny days can get very cold, can't they? Because that was so freezing yesterday. You couldn't have gotten through it. It would have been. And the answer is no, it wasn't security. With that being said, I thought the Capitol, the Rotunda, was beautiful. 72 degrees, unbelievable sound. You know, it's like being in an opera house. I could see people wanting to do it there rather than outside.
Why did you remove John Bolton's security clearance, sir?
Because I think there was enough time. It's we take a job. You take a job. You want to do a job. We're not going to have security on people for the rest of their lives. Why should we? I thought he was a very dumb person, but I used him well because every time people saw me come into a meeting with John Bolton standing behind me, they thought that he'd attack them because he was a warmonger. He's the one that got us involved, along with Cheney and a couple of others, convinced Bush, which was a terrible decision, to blow up the Middle East. You know, we blew up the Middle East and we left. We got nothing out of it except a lot of death. We killed a lot of people. And John Bolton was, one of those guys, a stupid guy. But no, you can't have that for life. You shouldn't expect it for life.
You mentioned with President Zelensky, will that take place here? And when and where will you meet with?
I don't know. I mean, look, President Zelensky would like to have peace. He's told me that very strongly. He'd like to have peace, but it takes two to tango. We'll see what happens.
When will you meet with President Putin?
Anytime they want, I'll meet. I'd like to see that end. Millions of people are being killed, and they're being killed. It's a vicious situation, and they're now largely soldiers. A lot of people have been killed in the cities. They look like demolition sites. Buildings, massive buildings bombed and coming down. The thing with Ukraine is that many more people died than you're reporting. You're not reporting the real numbers. And I'm not blaming you for that. I'm blaming maybe our government for not wanting to release those numbers. Many more people died than what you know about. When those big buildings come down and they say 2 people were injured, no. Many people, thousands of people are being killed. But the real killing now is on the war front. It's a very flat land. And the only thing that stops a bullet is somebody's body. And you have young soldiers. So Russia's lost about 800,000 soldiers now. Ukraine's lost about 600 or 700,000. I think the numbers are low that they're giving out. But they've lost massive numbers of young soldiers. And that war should stop. It's very flat, it's beautiful farmland, and it's flat and really beautiful in a different kind of a way, but they don't have any protection. The only thing that stops a bullet is a body, and those bodies are stopping a lot of bullets, and they're being decimated, both sides.
In your conversation with President Xi, what did you tell him in terms of when to expect tariffs, and what can he do to avoid them?
About which one? About tariffs? We didn't talk too much about tariffs, other than he knows where I stand. Look, I put large tariffs on China. I've taken in hundreds of billions of dollars. Until I was president, China never paid not 10 cents to the United States. With me, they paid hundreds of $600 billion or so, or more than that even, of tariffs. And if I didn't do that, you wouldn't have a steel mill open in the United States right now. You wouldn't have one steel mill open in the United States. So what I did is I saved the steel industry. I saved other industries, too, with other tariffs. Other countries are big abusers also. You know, it's not just China. China's an abuser, but the European Union is very, very bad to us. They treat us very, very badly. They don't take our cars. They don't take our cars at all. They don't take our farm products, essentially. They don't take very much. We have a $350 billion deficit with the European Union. They treat us very, very badly. So they're going to be in for tariffs. It's the only way you're going to get back. It's the only way you're going to get fairness. You can't get fairness unless you do that. But the European Union's treated us very badly. But essentially, everybody treats us badly. You know, everybody treats us badly. Yes, go ahead. Because we allow them to. Because we've had stupid people doing this, and we can't have. I'd like to have these three people negotiate for us, just for 1 week, and we'd be a rich country again. But we'll be rich.
Mr. President, on AI data centers, will you rescind President Biden's executive order that opens up federal land?
On which centers?
On data centers. Will you rescind President Biden's executive order that opens up federal lands for data centers and energy production?
No, I wouldn't do that. That sounds to me like it's something that I would like. I'd like to see federal lands opened up for data centers. I think they're going to be very important. Again, we have a lot of competition for that. So it's an honor to have these three great people, great CEOs and great geniuses, all three. It's an honor that they want to come to our country, but we're going to make it as easy as we can for them because other countries want them to. I'm going to have to go now. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Do you have TikTok on your phone?
No, but I think I might put it there. I think I'll get it right now. By the way, again, we won the young vote. I think I won it through TikTok. So I have a warm spot in my heart for TikTok. Okay? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, President Trump there answering a series of questions unrelated to that AI announcement that he just rolled out on a whole bunch of different topics, notably among them the January 6th pardons to the roughly 1,500 defendants who were convicted related to the attack on the Capitol here in Washington 4 years ago. You heard our Peter Alexander, and I think this is us re-racking the tape. So what you're looking at is not live. This is what just happened. Our Peter Alexander in the room representing the TV network Pool, pressing him on those pardons, on specifically some of the violent offenders, the people who were convicted of, for example, attacking police officers. And you heard the president's response there at one point suggesting he may look at that pardon. We'll get into that, too. He said China tariffs should go into effect, he says, around February 1st, that he would be open to Elon Musk, somebody who's, of course, become a close confidant, buying TikTok and perhaps, in the president's words, giving half to the United States. Also talking about foreign policy as well, specifically that Russian invasion of Ukraine and this issue of funding for Ukraine. He says he's looking at that and expects to speak to Russian President Vladimir Putin at some point soon. We are joined now by some folks to break this down. Vaughn Hilliard, Brian Chung, and our NBC News legal analyst, Danny Savalos, as well. Vaughn, let me start with you here because, and we'll take this in a few different sort of sections. Let's start with the fallout from those January 6th pardons. That happened late yesterday evening before the president and the first lady headed out to those balls on Inauguration Day. Now on his first full day, you are seeing the release of some of those January 6th convicted felons, if you will, the people who were convicted in the attack on the Capitol on a variety of different charges, including seditious conspiracy in a couple of instances. And you heard our colleague, our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, press the president on this issue repeatedly here, suggesting that if you back the blue, how can you give these pardons to people who attacked law enforcement? Talk us through what stood out to you specifically on this issue.
Right, and Peter used a specific example of an individual who was violently assaulted officers, and that's where President Trump there said that he would evaluate each of the circumstances. But he and his team have already made those evaluations, and they've already issued those pardons. And more than 175 individuals who violently assaulted police officers, either by pleading guilty or having been found guilty by juries, were among those who were pardoned. And I think that the words of President Trump just a few moments ago was very explicit that, quote, these people love their country. And when another reporter in the room asked him specifically about those Oath Keepers and Proud Boy leaders, 14 of them who had their sentences commuted, they were found guilty on seditious conspiracy charges in an effort to keep Donald Trump installed in the White House as part of an effort to stall that January 6th transfer of power. He made the suggestion that they had served their time and that they had already been in prison for a number of years and deserved to be released. I think the other two headlines that I heard from that, Hallie, were number one, his suggestion that after meeting with Senate Majority Leader John Thune here this afternoon at the White House, that if some of the cabinet secretaries who he wants to be confirmed are potentially facing Republican opposition, that he would urge them to go and do recess appointments, essentially bypassing the confirmation process. And then the other part is we continue to hear him put threats on not only Canada, Mexico, EU, and China for tariffs anywhere from 10 to 25%, and as soon as beginning on February 1st.
Vaughn Hilliard, I'm going to ask you to stand by for a second. And let me ask you this, a logistical question, and I don't want to put you on the spot. Do we expect to see the president again tonight, or is he done for the evening?
I think that is a good question. I think that this is
TBD.
where this is unlike President Biden's White House, where, right, they have put a, quote, lid, and everybody knows that the night is done. We shouldn't expect any more news. But President Trump, right, he was posting on social media almost at 2 a.m. last night. And I think as we learned anything from the first administration, Hallie, it's that the night is not done until the tweets or the true social posts stop coming.
I remember those days well. Vaughn Hilliard, stand by. Danny, let me go to you on this and the January 6th pardon issue, because one of the things that stood out to me was when Peter asked about this, and I believe that he was asking, and don't quote me here, but I think it was DJ Rodriguez, somebody who basically was convicted for essentially putting a stun gun to a police officer's neck. The president said something along the lines of, you know, was it a pardon or a commutation? It was, Peter said, a pardon, and then suggested that we will look into it. Once you issue a pardon, Danny, as president, we know that that is a sweeping presidential power. Can you unissue it, or once it's done, it's done?
No, once it's delivered, it cannot be undelivered. The law of pardons somewhat tracks the law of gifts. So, for example, and in fact, the word pardon has its roots in the same root as the word donate. So there is something in its essence that is the act of giving. It is a kind of executive gift. And a gift, like a pardon, is not valid until it's delivered and accepted. So in theory, and it happens sometimes, people reject pardons, but once delivered, once accepted, the pardon is not revocable. It cannot be revoked. There are no takebacks once the pardon is accepted. But right up until acceptance and delivery, a pardon could, in theory, be revoked. Much like a gift. If someone says, I'm going to give you a gift, until that gift is in your hands legally, you have no entitlement to that freebie.
Danny, thanks. Brian, let me go to you on a couple of the other headlines here. You heard Vaughn reference tariffs. You heard the president talk about a 10% on China. Timeline he laid on that was, when is February 1st? 9 or 10 days from now? Yeah, like relatively soon. And then TBD timeline on what he has threatened even during the campaign, 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, I believe he said. The impact of that, listen, the markets are closed, but you know that Wall Street is listening to that very closely, as are small businesses and farmers all around the country.
Yeah, and Wall Street, by the way, seemed to get some reprieve yesterday in the non-action on tariffs. Essentially, they were worried that on day one he would kind of begin this tariff war, and markets kind of taking some reprieve in the fact that he didn't. But then late last night, you recall that as he was signing executive actions, that he had quipped to some questions that were lobbed at him, that he was thinking about this February 1st deadline or maybe not deadline, but February 1st goal for lobbying these tariffs on both Canada and also Mexico. He reiterated that point today, which kind of adds a little bit more substantiating kind of evidence to the fact that his White House is serious about that February 1st date to begin the process of those tariffs. I do want to also kind of point out, though, that we could want to decouple that from the potential tariffs on China. It did sound like he was talking and trying to paraphrase his conversations with President Xi Jinping of China. Apparently tariffs were discussed, but there isn't necessarily a timeline that might be as rigid as that February 1st date when it comes to perhaps those tariffs on China, which on the campaign trail he proposes even more dramatic than the tariffs that would be on Mexico and Canada. So still very much that we're going to have to anticipate in terms of the details on how he does that.
A great point. Good context. Brian, let me ask you about this TikTok question. You heard it at the end there. And for folks who weren't able to quite hear because it was a little bit off mic, our producer tells us that he was asked about TikTok on his phone. He said he doesn't have TikTok on his phone, but said, I might put it there, which, thinking back to his position years ago, or the position of the Biden administration up until about, a couple of weeks ago, let's say, rather surprising, to say the least, because we saw TikTok banned in various states on various workers' phones, et cetera. People put in place some of these regulations and these laws here. Now the president is suggesting he is open to his close confidant Elon Musk maybe buying TikTok. The TikTok drama is far from over, despite that EO he signed last night, essentially giving them a 75-day window to figure this out.
Yeah, and separately, there's the concern or the question over whether or not a federal employee like the president of the United States should have that app on their phones, as many states tried to ban with their employees. But
for national security reasons, right?
Yeah, for national security reasons, which was the point of the bill that Congress passed and that Biden signed into law to try to ban this app. Now, as you point out, there was that 75-day review, essentially, that he kicked off with that executive action last night that could give TikTok the path to avoiding a permanent ban by having some sort of divestiture, which would be a qualified one that he could just put his stamp on. Now, what would that look like? He has said on Truth Social prior to inauguration that he could see some sort of joint venture, maybe 50% ownership in the United States. The other 50% could be owned by ByteDance or whatever else if they do spin off TikTok US, whatever the Chinese government would like that 50% to look like. So who owns the US stake of it? It does sound like, based off of that exchange, that he could be open to Elon Musk doing it. And Larry Ellison, who was in the room right next to him, is at Oracle. And Oracle, in previous discussions over divestment of TikTok in months past, has been kind of rumored to be in the mix as well. So maybe Larry Ellison was listening very, very closely to his answer there. But again, he has suggested, kind of without any sort of substantiating data, that the app could be worth $1 trillion. You can imagine that can make some people very close to his orbit a lot of money, Hallie, if that is true.
Where do we stand at NBC News on the reporting around the speculation that noted YouTuber Mr. Beast may be interested in buying TikTok?
Yeah, well, again, there have been a number of people that have tried to throw their name into the ring. You also think about Frank McCourt and also the likes of Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank fame. Steve Mnuchin, the former Treasury Secretary, again, under the Trump administration, has proposed perhaps taking on a stake as well. Again, could it be a consortium of all of those people or maybe just one person? All we do know is that this is going to require negotiations with the Chinese government. This is not just a show-chew or a ByteDance conversation. The Chinese government is going to likely have to give their approval to anything that would be done. So there's going to be a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to trying to make a deal here happen.
Vaughn, let me just look ahead with you to the rest of the president's week here, because we knew he was going to be heading, he already has said, to North Carolina, to Asheville, which was devastated by Hurricane Hallie later in the week. He has suggested he would go to Los Angeles, obviously another area that is in the midst of disaster recovery, a very active situation. And then he alluded to perhaps a trip to Nevada to thank people there for their vote in the presidential election, which sounded a lot like perhaps a return to those campaign-style rallies as president. What's your sense?
Right. We don't have any indication of a campaign rally here at this point in time. But Nevada was obviously one of those battleground states that he was able to pull off after not winning it in 2016 and 2020. And so for him, he is clearly somebody who is eager to get back on the road, of course, visiting two places that were hit by tragedy in North Carolina and Los Angeles. But, ever since he won the presidential election on November 5th, he has effectively stayed down in Palm Beach, New York. He made the stop in Paris for the Notre Dame reopening, but he never actually went out on the, quote, campaign trail, if you will. And it was not until at the Capital One Arena in downtown D.C. over the last 48 hours, for those two events inside of a packed arena of 20,000 people that he had the opportunity to kind of do a campaign type event again. So we will see, and obviously a big part of for any president, not just himself. We've seen this for President Biden, President Obama, Bush, but taking your policy agenda on the road and essentially making the sell. And Nevada is a place that narrowly reelected a Democratic senator just this last November here. And so this is a moment for him to go and make the pitch, their legislative priorities that they're going to seek to pass here in the months ahead up on Capitol Hill.
Vaughn Hilliard, Brian Chung, Danny Savalos, glad to have you all as we are spending yet another night together in rolling coverage here on NBC News Now. Guys, thank you. We've also got to get to the day's other big headline. This is coming to us from down south, and it's coming to us in a way that we really haven't seen a lot. This Arctic blast that is slamming parts of Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, states of emergency in place, areas that do not know how to deal with what you're seeing right now, right? Snow in Houston. Somebody doing a snow angel. They're building like a snow castle. That is interesting to see, of course, perhaps fun for some folks. But for others, it is a real headache, if not worse. You are seeing Houston tying its unofficial record of 3 inches of snow already. Alabama, Louisiana also in record territory. You've seen roads shut down, highways with word from county officials that they are simply impassable. Look at this. Parts of the Florida Panhandle seeing snow hit beach towns. Some airports have shut down completely for now, suspended operations. And then you've got these power outages, which is just uncomfortable for so many people in the region. I want to bring in Priscilla Thompson, who is in Houston for us tonight. Priscilla, listen, it is winter, it is cold, period, full stop. Have you watched this show before? You've heard me say it, but to see it in places like this that are simply not accustomed to dealing with the ice, the snow, you're seeing the power outages already. Talk to us about the impact.
Yeah, Hallie, it is hard to believe that we are in Houston right now. When you look around at this winter wonderland, the snow was coming down very heavy earlier today, and it has stopped now. But folks are getting out there enjoying that snow. But as you noted, there are a lot of very real concerns, one of them being with people being out on the roads. And we have seen a lot of people doing that, particularly in this downtown Houston area, coming out in buggies and in their trucks and trying to spin out and do wheelies on the roads. And that is totally not safe. And thankfully, there have been police and other folks out trying to patrol some of that. But what officials are saying here and across these regions, Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, all of these places, is that people need to stay off the roads. These are not conditions that people in the South are necessarily used to driving in. And they also want road crews to be able to get out there to do the salting, to do the plows in the cities that have the plows. But as you noted, this is the South. A lot of these cities are not even stocked with those kinds of resources. And so some of this is going to be waiting for this snow to melt. And that is where the concern is going to come in over the next couple days, because we're talking about temperatures that are going to remain below freezing. And so that ice could become a bigger threat on the roads. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, a sentence that is surprising to say, live in snowy Houston. Priscilla, thank you so much. A less surprising sentence now, and a difficult one, fire in Southern California. We have seen that, another major fire threat now, about 120 miles away from Los Angeles, down in San Diego, where we're already seeing, look at this flame spark up. At least 2 new fires have begun there, and we're seeing evacuations as well. Up in L.A., after the Eaton fire, some in Altadena are finally being allowed to get back into their neighborhoods days after that fire ripped through. Crews are still working round the clock to put out these smaller pop-up fires, like the one you're looking at. That's near Griffith Observatory, kind of a landmark there in L.A. It is out now with an arson suspect under arrest. Liz Kreutz is on the ground now in the Pacific Palisades. And Liz, we saw what happened down in San Diego. We know that L.A. is still reeling, still in the middle of a very active situation there as it relates to the Eaton and the Palisades fire. And folks are finally getting a chance to see what is left, in some cases, what little is left of their homes.
Yeah, and you just saw that wind gust come through. We're still having windy conditions here, those Santa Ana winds, which is what's fueling some of those fires down in San Diego right now. We are in the Palisades burn area, Hallie, and we've been watching as some of the families have been able to return to their homes for the first time, now 2 weeks after these fires ignited. And as you can imagine, it's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking. So many of these families have said that they've seen the pictures people have taken of their burned out homes, but it's not until they actually see it with their own eyes and they show up that it's really hit them. This isn't just some horrible nightmare. There's a family that we've been following that we just were with them as they pulled up and saw their home here for the first time. Here's what the woman, Maureen, had to say.
When I was coming down the street, it's just blue. It's mind-blowing that, and seeing this, I was hoping maybe something survived. It's just unreal.
Just trying to say, I would hope I would pull up and see something, but you just look around and you look at the rubble and it's hard to imagine that anything could be left. These fires just burned so hot and everything is just reduced to rubble. But Hallie, I will not be totally depressing. Yesterday, we were following another fire, another family in the Altadena fire, and they were sifting through the rubble and they came across a jewelry box that was somehow untouched, and they opened it up. And there was her wedding ring inside, untouched. So,
but Liz,
little moments.
It's those moments, right? Those silver linings that people are looking for now. The rain that's on the way, maybe another one of those, right?
Yes, which is like a bizarre, here's a bizarre thing. Of course, it's a silver lining. We want rain, Hallie, but at the same time, there's also this concern now about rain. California, we need it. But because of all of this debris, there's also a concern now that if there's too much of this rain, potentially this weekend, it could lead to mudslides, which we have seen in the wake of other fires before. So it's sort of a tricky situation. There is rain in the forecast for Saturday. Right now, though, the mayor has issued an executive order basically allowing crews to expedite some of the cleanup here to try to put things into place to help mitigate how much toxic debris might flow into the ocean if we see rain, put out sandbags, bolster some of the concrete barriers to try to prepare if we do get rain this weekend, Hallie.
Liz Kreutz live for us in the Palisades. Liz, thank you for being there. Thank you for sharing those stories. Appreciate it. Right now, we're also learning some new details about investigations into a string of high-profile burglaries involving these pro athletes. We've talked about them on this show. You've probably heard about them. Now, Ohio investigators are indicting 4 Chilean nationals, accusing them of stealing from multi-million-dollar homes. Now, they're not being linked directly to that December break-in at the home of Joe Burrow, the NFL quarterback, but court documents say some Cincinnati Bengals gear, which was believed to be stolen from Burrow's home, was found in the suspect's SUV. The big question now is whether all these so-called bling ring robberies could be connected. Look at this. All these athletes, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, reported robberies at their homes while they were traveling for games. The most recent, Evgeny Malkin from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Police are currently investigating a break-in at his home on January 11th. Maggie Vespa is joining us now. So talk through who these suspects are, how they were caught, the charges they're facing, the connection as we kind of laid out here. Again, police not making it officially, but the suspected potential connection to the Bengals.
Right, they're really dancing around the details here.
That's
so
right.
As a result, we have to, too. But, the affidavit tied to this arrest of these 4 Chilean nationals, they were arrested at the same time, was really specific about an LSU shirt and a Bengals hat found inside their SUV that police say, court documents say, was linked to, they said, a December 9th burglary in the county where Joe Burrow lives. And our affiliate, WLTW, did some research saying that's the only multi-million-dollar home burglary on that day in that county. So that's how we're kind of connecting the dots. You can see it. You can see it there. At the same time, also, the Attorney General of Ohio announcing today these 4 men ranging in age from 20 up into their upper 30s, all Chilean nationals, all they say either in the country illegally or having overstayed their visas. They were under surveillance after that burglary by basically a task force that was working on this investigation into multi-million-dollar home burglaries. Yeah. Those are the charges that they're facing there, participating in a criminal gang, engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity. So it's really pointing to this possibility of a ring, of a burglary ring, which is what we've been following. And it's no secret, these athletes are on the road. They're playing often away games when these break-ins happen. Their schedules are public, and that's been a really, authorities have said already with these cases, an obvious link that leads people to believe that these all might be connected.
That's right.
We reached out to Joe Burrow and to the Bengals today. No response to these arrests or this indictment thus far. But Joe Burrow did tell reporters, did address this in a press conference, a post-game press conference last month. Here's part of what he said about just what this has been like to handle.
We live a public life, and, one of my least favorite parts of that is the lack of privacy, and that has been difficult for me to deal with my entire career.
Again, so that was Joe Burrows on December 11th. He's not commenting today. Hallie, I should point out, the public defender tied to all four of these cases, representing all four of these Chilean nationals. We've reached out to him. We haven't yet heard back. We'll let you know if that changes.
Because part of this, and Maggie, and you're right to say burglaries. I misspoke on Robert. Burglaries are what happened here. The geographic spread of them, right? Because we're talking about these suspects caught in Ohio. The others that we're talking about, these burglaries happened in Missouri, Texas. Right. Do we know if these investigators are coordinating across state lines, et cetera? Like, talk through that piece of it.
So we've heard about this from the FBI prior to this arrest, and the arrest affidavit, the court documents that we have, those say that this is part of an investigation into burglaries in multi-million-dollar homes, key in multiple states. So at least this arrest is part of an investigation that's linking these robberies in multiple states. They don't say the athletes. Once again, they leave out the detail of saying we're talking about Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes, but that's part of that document right there. At the same time, again, we've been following this for a while. FBI sources, government sources have talked to our DOJ teams and our criminal justice teams, telling them that this is at least something of a pattern, of a tactic that is used broadly, and specifically organized crime rings from South America. We have some sources saying from Chile especially, are something that American authorities are becoming more aware of as a broad problem, saying they're really professional, they move really quickly, they come in with Wi-Fi jammers, police scanner jammers, they scout people's homes, they kind of lie in wait, getting to know somebody's schedule, and then they strike, often going in through the second floor, because people often have alarms tied to their first floor entryways, but not their second floor. And think about where you keep your jewelry, where you keep your valuables. It's often in a second floor closet, right? But those are often less secure. So they're incredibly savvy. And authorities have said that they've been trying to kind of sound the alarm about this more broadly. These cases have given them a bigger platform, with an FBI memo, according to a senior official last month, warning sports leagues to tell their athletes to stop advertising valuables on social media and kind of showing your home and kind of any indication like that, just doing everything they can, Hallie, to protect themselves.
Maggie Vespa, lots to watch there. Maggie, thank you. Appreciate that. Some new fallout tonight, as we're just learning thousands of Afghan refugees already cleared to come to the U.S. are now facing flight cancellations. According to a refugee resettlement advocate, President Trump, remember, just signed an executive order putting a halt on all refugee programs in this country. The White House writing that the U.S. lacks the ability to absorb large numbers of migrants, and in particular refugees, into its communities in a manner that does not compromise the availability of resources for Americans. That executive order goes on to say that the refugee program will remain suspended until, as they put it, further entry into the U.S. of refugees aligns with the interests of the country. I want to go right to Courtney Cuby here. There is some real concern here from these refugee resettlement advocates about the work that some of these people did for the United States at a difficult time and their entry into this country.
Yeah, and one of these advocacy groups called Afghan EVAC is primarily veterans and advocates, who many of whom have actually deployed, spent time in Afghanistan, and so they are extremely intent on getting these Afghans out. They've been working to do so since 2021, as you mentioned, Hallie. Some of these Afghans are individuals who supported the U.S. throughout the war in Afghanistan and their families, but in addition to that, there are unaccompanied minors who are waiting to come to the United States to be reunited with their families. There's also people who actually have some part of or are related to U.S. citizens who are stuck there as well. We're talking about more than 1,600 of these individuals who were expecting to be able to come to the United States. And now, according to this advocacy group, Afghan EVAC, now they are waiting. Their flights, it seems, have been at least delayed, if not completely canceled here. But it's not just them, Hallie. We're talking about potentially thousands of individuals across the world who have been impacted by this executive action by Donald Trump, specifically dealing with refugee and resettlement and parole in some cases.
Courtney Cuby, live for us on that front. Court, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, at least one American detained in Afghanistan has been released in an apparent prisoner exchange with the Taliban. That's according to the family of Ryan Corbett, who was arrested in the country back in 2022. The State Department had classified him as wrongfully detained. A Taliban spokesperson telling NBC News a second American has also been freed, although that person's identity has not been released. Number 2, a judge today upholding the murder case against the only suspect ever charged in connection with the 1996 killing of Tupac. Lawyers for Dwayne Davis claim he never should have been charged because of immunity deals reached years ago with law enforcement. But the judge says the defense provided no proof those deals even existed. The trial is set to begin in March, but could be delayed while Davis appeals. He has pleaded not guilty. Number 3, a union representing thousands of Costco workers just voted to authorize a strike. The Teamsters Union wants more pay, better benefits before the current deal expires at the end of the month. Costco did not immediately respond to a request for comment from our friends at CNBC. Number 4, JetBlue says it is the first airline now that'll be accepting Venmo for your flight. You can pay on the airline's website first and then via your phone, via mobile in the next couple months. Number 5, some breaking news in the 5 things from the sports world. Ichiro Suzuki becoming the first Japanese player to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. Remember, he came to the Seattle Mariners from Japan when he was 27 back in 2001, ended up with more than 3,000 hits. Pitchers CC Sabathia and Billy Wagner also got the call from Cooperstown just in the last couple of minutes. So there you go. Hot, fresh sports scoops right here on the show. Coming up. President Trump pulling the country out of the World Health Organization, what that move may mean for your health. Plus, the Israeli military chief says he's stepping down. He's taking responsibility for not preventing the October 7th attacks. The World Health Organization now asking the U.S. to reconsider just hours after President Trump withdrew the country from the Global Health Agency. Of course, the president's been a strong critic of the WHO, who repeatedly said that the organization helped the Chinese government mislead the world about COVID and accuses the organization of being politically influenced. He also says the U.S. is paying way too much into it, saying that the WHO continues to, I'm quoting here, demand unfairly onerous payments from the U.S. out of proportion with others. The U.S. is the WHO's top contributor with about 18% of its $6.8 billion budget to fund research and global prep to fight infectious diseases like COVID, HIV, tuberculosis. I want to bring in Erica Edwards here. A lot of questions right now about what this move actually means now that the president has ordered the U.S. to essentially pull out of the World Health Organization. Break it down.
Yeah, that's the question right now, right? What does this mean for you and me and for the rest of us? Right now, nothing. Any move to leave the World Health Organization will take at least 1 year and possibly congressional approval. But here's the thing. The WHO is the only global health group with the ability to bring together the world's leading nations together to compare notes when it comes to emerging viral threats. If the U.S. pulls out, we won't have a seat at that table. Now, the WHO released a statement today, reading in part, we hope the United States will reconsider, and we look forward to engaging in constructive dialogue to maintain the partnership between the USA and WHO for the benefit of the health and well-being of millions of people around the globe. Hallie.
Well, let's talk about the next health crisis in this country. What happens then if America is, let's say it happens after everything you just laid out, if America is going at it without support or guidance from the WHO?
Yeah, so America, of course, is a powerhouse when it comes to surveilling flu, whooping cough, any other, diseases and viruses. And every expert I talked with today was adamant that pulling away from the WHO would be misguided, a mistake, that we'd be left vulnerable to emerging health problems. But the WHO was founded in 1948, and communication has come a long way since then. We now have social media. We have streaming platforms when it comes to doctors and, other healthcare organizations to share information. So could we be embarking on a new chapter of health information sharing? That's to be continued. Hallie?
How can you talk through some of the criticism that President Trump has of the WHO? How is that being perceived around the world? How fair do other world leaders in the health space think that is?
Yeah, so experts say that, it's true that in the very beginning, they criticized WHO for just going into China and sort of taking their word for it, that they really were not able to sort of counter what was happening there. And so that was a bit of a mess up when it comes to how the coronavirus was first handled. And that is what critics generally, talk about. They are the fact that WHO is so reliant on their contributors. Hallie?
Erica Edwards, our medical contributor. Erica, we're glad to have you on that front. Thank you very much. NBC News covers hundreds of other international stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's a look at what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Colombia, the president says he's declaring a state of emergency over deadly guerrilla attacks. He's also saying he's deploying thousands of troops to contain that violence in the northeast of the country, which has killed at least 80 people and displaced thousands of others. In Turkey, officials are looking into a fire that ripped through a popular ski resort there today. Very deadly. 70 people killed, dozens of others hurt. You're looking at some of the aftermath here. The fire apparently started at a restaurant at the hotel. They're trying to understand why. Out of Israel, the country's top general resigning today over security and intelligence failures on October 7th, of course, the day of that Hamas attack. He now has become the most senior Israeli official to resign over the attack, one that killed more than 1,000 people in Israel, led to hundreds of abductions, and set off the start, of course, of that war, now with that ceasefire pause that has led to the deaths, according to the health ministry in Gaza, to more than 45,000 people. In his resignation letter, he said under his command, the military failed to defend Israel. The resignation goes into effect in March. Still ahead for us here on the show, President Trump remaking his inner circle for term number 2. So who made the cut? That's next. So tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And with President Trump now back in office, we're taking a closer look at those closest to him, the people who will help him shape the country for the next 4 years. And unlike his first term, some of the faces are going to look different. Watch. A second Trump term, starting with an inner circle that looks almost nothing like the first. This time, the president set to be surrounded by loyal supporters of his MAGA movement. Some, like his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, former foes.
We cannot elect someone who's trying to carry out a con job.
Turned friends, or at least followers of the Trump doctrine. Others, longtime allies, like Pam Bondi, one of Mr. Trump's impeachment lawyers, selected to serve as Attorney General, echoing his criticism of the Justice Department as politicized.
They targeted Donald Trump. They went after him.
Mr. Trump, comfortable with controversy, and that's reflected in cabinet picks like Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News host, facing questions about his qualifications to run the world's most expensive military, and about allegations of sexual assault, which he denies, and alcohol abuse, which he dismisses.
Anonymous smears.
And then there's Kash Patel, chosen to lead the FBI, who's published names of people he calls the deep state in what critics call an enemies list. Patel, along with former Democrat Tulsi Gabbard, who may serve as Director of National Intelligence, and hedge fund manager Scott Bessent, tapped as Treasury Secretary, will need to be confirmed by the Senate, as will all of Mr. Trump's cabinet picks, including Linda McMahon, former WWE exec and one of the few cabinet holdovers from Mr. Trump's first administration, now tapped to run the Education Department, which the president wants to dismantle altogether. But other members of Mr. Trump's inner circle will influence policy without needing the Senate's sign-off, including hardline architect of Mr. Trump's immigration policy, Stephen Miller. The president's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, led his winning campaign and could serve as a steady hand in a job that turned over 4 times in Mr. Trump's first term. And big-name tech billionaires who have embraced Mr. Trump, now set to serve as informal advisors. Chief among them, Elon Musk, who's become a close confidant, the world's richest man looking to cut trillions from the federal budget.
Your money is being wasted, and the Department of Government Efficiency is going to fix that.
unlike 8 years ago, the Trump family is not expected to play as publicly prominent a part. The president's oldest daughter, Ivanka, who once had an office in the West Wing, says she's done with politics and doesn't plan to come back. Her husband, Jared Kushner, also not expected to take a formal role. And while Eric and Donald Trump Jr. stayed out of the White House in 2017, they stayed close to the campaign in 2024. Not just sons, but surrogates.
But he knew he had to run if there was any chance at saving America.
Don Jr., an early champion of Vice President J.D. Vance, another former Trump skeptic turned supporter, now a potential successor to the MAGA movement.
Sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump.
And of course, Vice President Vance now set to work side by side with the president for the next 4 years. Still to come here on the show, could a royal settlement be in the works? Why we may not see Prince Harry take on Rupert Murdoch's newspapers in court. Some drama and some confusion today in a London courtroom with last-minute settlement talks stalling Prince Harry's high-stakes trial against Rupert Murdoch's British tabloids. He's suing Murdoch's News Group newspapers over allegations reporters paid private investigators to hack into voicemail messages to get information about Harry and his family. The company has denied any wrongdoing. Now, a settlement would be kind of surprising because Harry has said he's following through with this suit to try to hold these tabloids to account. But it could come at a huge financial cost. That's because even if Prince Harry were to win, he would have to shell out tens of millions of dollars in legal costs. Hallie has more.
Hallie, there was lots of confusion and last-minute delays in this case pitting Prince Harry against the News Group newspaper, publisher of the Sun tabloid here in the United Kingdom and owned by Rupert Murdoch. Both sides requested delays in the case, really to the exasperation of the judge, who said that it was time to get things going. As a result, the case will only start in earnest tomorrow at 10 a.m. local time. So the big question is, do these delays mean that the parties are negotiating some kind of settlement with the Sun tabloid, which has always denied that it had wrongfully or unlawfully acted in gathering information and news about Prince Harry and the royals? Well, one of the lawyers mentioned a time zone difference or a time difference issue. Could it mean, therefore, that Prince Harry, because he's in a different time zone in California, is being included in some sort of last-minute discussion? Now, some of our viewers might remember that he had testified in another case against the Mirror Group newspapers, a case in which he also alleged unlawful information gathering, and after which he was awarded a significant settlement. Now, if Prince Harry Hallie testifies in this case, if no settlement is announced, he will probably take the stand in February, according to a source who spoke about this to NBC News. The trial itself would last between 8 and 10 weeks. Hallie, back to you.
Hallie, thank you for that. That does it for us for this hour, but much more coverage coming up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.